Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Lees. Tonight's top story. A new report criticises government handling of the pandemic. It says the UK's pandemic planning was too narrow and the government failed to take a strict enough approach to closing borders. Also tonight, COVID passes roll out in Wales, bringing challenges for nightclubs and bars. We talk to the chief executive of the Nighttime Industries Association, who says the new rules are distorting the market. And the Brexit minister says Britain is ready to suspend the Northern Ireland Protocol if it has to, in order to safeguard peace in the province. He urges the EU to agree to significant changes. In October 2020, a joint inquiry into the handling of the pandemic was established by the Science and Technology Committee and the Health and Social Care Committee. They assessed areas including pandemic preparedness and the deployment of lockdowns. This morning, the two committees released their 145-page report. NTD's Malcolm Hudson is here with more.
A report published today says the UK's preparation for a pandemic was too focused on a flu model and that ministers waited too long to implement lockdown measures in early 2020. The aim of the report, Coronavirus Lessons Learned, was to give a fuller evaluation of the government's response and handling of the pandemic. It noted that the rapid response of the NHS required a significant amount of resources to be repurposed from elsewhere in the system. This led to a substantial number of missed and cancelled non-COVID appointments. Also covered was the light touch border control, which left the door open for the virus to enter through Spain and France, and, it says, made the lockdown almost inevitable. Cabinet Office Minister Stephen Barclay commented on Sky News on Tuesday that the evidence available led to the government's decisions.
Well, no, we followed the scientific advice.
So no apology?
We followed the scientific advice. We protected the NHS. We took the decisions based on the evidence before us. But of course, we've always said with something so unprecedented as the pandemic, there will be lessons to learn. We're keen to learn them. That's why we've committed to an inquiry. And that will be the opportunity to look at what could be done differently and what lessons we take into the future.
Barclay says he has not yet had the chance to read the report. The report says it does not seek to apportion blame. It gives its conclusions and recommendations to inform preparations for future threats and to improve current COVID measures. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
The government is planning an independent public inquiry into its handling of the pandemic. It's expected to take place in the first half of next year. Scotland is also planning to start its own separate inquiry later this year. To other news, it was the first night of COVID-19 passes in Wales on Monday. People now need to show their COVID pass to get into large events and nightclubs. There are concerns that the rules will distort the market for the already hard-hit nighttime industry. It comes just 10 days after COVID passes came into force in Scotland, where people don't have the option to show a negative test. NTD's Jane Well has this report.
As COVID passes are introduced in Wales, the chief executive of the Nighttime Industries Association says the new rules are distorting the market.
Well, we're already seeing many people on the border, particularly the towns on the border like Bristol for Wales and some of the northern cities, hearing many people coming down from Scotland and, across from Wales. So we are going to see that displacement. We are going to see a market distortion. There is a concern with regard to the cultural tapestry that is presented in Wales and in Scotland and the way that competitive disadvantage is going to play out.
He says since the new rules, some people in Scotland have cancelled tickets or promoters have gone south of the border. It could also result in more underground parties and logistical challenges for operators.
There are some challenges logistically and operationally with how this is going to be administered, not only from a customer perspective. The operators have got to get to grips with it, but they're also have to understand from a local authority and a police perspective how they're going to be interpret everything on the ground.
The law was passed controversially by the Labour-led Welsh Parliament last week by a single vote. Tory MP Gareth Davies, who was voting remotely, couldn't log in to Zoom to vote. Boris Johnson said he wants to avoid using them in England, but has said that he will keep them as a backup measure. Jane Werrell, NTD News.
The Northern Ireland Assembly debates exclusion zones outside pregnancy counselling centres. This means people protesting against abortion would be banned from the zones. If passed, the bill would be the first of its kind in the UK. NTD's Eddie Aiken has the story.
Northern Ireland Assembly members debate proposals for exclusion zones outside pregnancy counselling centres on Tuesday. Anti-abortion protests and demonstrations would not be allowed within the zones. The plan was proposed by Green Party Northern Ireland leader Claire Bailey. She hopes the zones will protect staff and women accessing the services. A majority of Stormont parties backed the proposals, voting 58 to 28 to progress the bill.
What is it about other people's pregnancies that offers such fascination to so many? What is it that compels people to stand outside a health clinic and intimidate women whose stories they'll never know or understand?
But some Democratic Unionist Party members don't support the bill. Jonathan Buckley says it is regressive and will limit people's democratic right to protest.
That there are many people in our society from a pro-life perspective whom are deeply offended at the termination of the unborn. And therefore they feel so passionate that it is their duty to stand up for the unborn, whether it be in democratic settings like this, but also from our community's perspective as well.
If passed, the bill would be the first legislation of its kind in the UK. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
In a speech in Lisbon, Brexit Minister David Frost put more pressure on the EU to agree to changes for the Northern Ireland Protocol. He says it's critical for safeguarding peace in Northern Ireland. As a last resort, he warned the UK might trigger Article 16. NTD's Joy Duguid has more on this.
Britain is ready to suspend the Northern Ireland Protocol if it needs to. That's for the sake of peace in the province.
We would not go down this road gratuitously or with any particular pleasure. But it is our fundamental responsibility to safeguard peace and prosperity in Northern Ireland, and that is why we cannot rest until this situation has been addressed.
Frost delivered a speech on Tuesday in Lisbon. The protocol governs trade and border rules in the province and is part of the UK's Brexit from the EU. Frost says due to the protocol's excessive rigidity, it is harming Northern Ireland.
The protocol is not working. It's completely lost consent in one community in Northern Ireland. It's not doing the thing it was set up to do, protect the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. In fact, doing the opposite. It has to change.
The protocol means an effective customs border in the Irish Sea. That is disturbing trade from the UK and angering unionists. Frost calls for significant changes. He says the protocol needs to be freed from the oversight of European judges. Observers say it's a demand the EU is unlikely to agree to. Frost says he doesn't want to trigger breakout clause of Article 16, but
Northern Ireland is not EU territory. It is our responsibility to safeguard peace and prosperity in Northern Ireland. And that may include using Article 16 if necessary.
Frost says he has proposed a new legal text to replace the protocol. And the EU Commission is due to present new measures on Wednesday to smooth trade. Joy Duguid, NTD News.
European leaders are alarmed by soaring energy prices and uncertainty over whether Russia will increase gas supplies to the EU. Despite President Putin's assurances that Russia is sending more gas to Europe, Gazprom continues to prioritize the Russian market amid accusations that it is trying to force approval for the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. The US and some European nations oppose the pipeline, which they believe will increase Russia's power as the EU's primary gas supplier. NTD's Eddie Aiken brings us this report.
Soaring energy prices are causing alarm among European leaders and sending shivers through global markets. Europe's natural gas prices have rocketed almost 600% this year. Consumers facing a huge jump in fuel bills are worried current storage levels will be insufficient for the winter. The European Union imports 41% of its gas from Russia and 16% from Norway. But whilst Norway is stepping up supplies to the EU, Russia is sending out conflicting messages on whether it will follow suit. Last week, President Putin said Russia was boosting gas supplies to Europe to stabilize the market. But the deputy CEO of Russian gas supply company Gazprom said it was continuing to pump natural gas to Russia's underground storage facilities. Gazprom also said this week it would prioritize its home market over exports because it expected a cold and snowy winter. Some parliamentarians allege that Gazprom is trying to force swift approval for Nord Stream 2, a pipeline that will send Russian gas to Germany. Russia has repeatedly denied any political agenda. The US and some European nations oppose the project, saying it will make the EU even more dependent on Russian fuel. EU ministers debated whether the bloc should begin jointly buying gas to improve their bargaining position and form strategic reserves. The EU Energy Commissioner says underground gas storage is more than 75% full across Europe, and countries have enough to cover their winter needs. But EU gas stocks are at a 10-year low. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
The gas blowers of Murano have survived plagues, pandemics and competition from Asia. But the price of the methane that powers their ovens has increased 5-fold this month, and their future is uncertain. Beyond economic losses, the islanders fear losing over 700 years of tradition and a reputation for artistic excellence. Here's NTD's Joy Duguid with the story.
Murano, off the coast of Venice, is known as the Glass Island. Glass blowing has been a way of life there for over 700 years. But surging energy prices see the industry struggling to cope and centuries of tradition under threat.
If it continues this way and we do not find solutions to the sudden and abnormal increase in gas prices, we can say that the entire glass industry in Murano is in great danger.
Decades ago, Murano glass blowers moved from unreliable wood ovens to methane gas furnaces. But the price of methane has increased 5-fold since October the 1st. The island's glass blowers face financial losses on the orders they are working to fill.
The problem is that we already have orders in. Products have been bought already at least 2 months ahead, so we can't increase prices for those items.
The dozens of furnaces on the lagoon island must burn around the clock to stop the costly crucible in the ovens from breaking. Cenedese, like others on Murano, is considering shutting down one of his furnaces to save on methane costs. But it will slow production and imperil orders. The high temperatures of the constantly burning furnaces create the delicate crystal clarity of highly prized Murano glass.
The value of this tradition, this history and this culture is priceless. It goes beyond the financial value of the glass industry in Murano.
There is a meeting with members of Parliament next week to ask for help. The glassblowers of Murano have survived plagues, pandemics and competition from Asia. They are determined not to let surging energy prices be their downfall.
Handmade beautiful things will always make it through. No machine can do what we do.
Joy Duguid, NTD News.
Still to come, Denmark is banning violent offenders from popular nightlife areas in an effort to reduce crime. Copenhagen now has 4 no-go zones where offenders cannot venture after dark. That and more after the break. Denmark is trying something new to reduce violent crime, barring violent offenders from cities' nightlife areas. Under a new law, Danish courts can exclude people convicted of violent crimes from popular streets. Copenhagen has recently set up 4 such no-go zones. NTD's Natalia Nutting has more for us.
Police in Copenhagen now have a new instrument to deal with violent crime. They have set up 4 no-go zones in Copenhagen's busy nightlife areas. Under a new law, Danish courts can exclude people convicted of violent crime from such zones between midnight and 5 a.m. It effectively controls after-dark access to whole streets popular with party-goers.
We have definitely got a new tool, a tool that hits the few but helps the many.
A court in the city of Helsingør last week sentenced a 24-year-old Dane to 5 months in prison for violent behavior. In addition, it banned him from visiting nightlife zones for 9 months. A ban can last up to 2 years. Violators can be fined over £1,100. A second offence means 30 days in prison.
Before nightlife zones we have set up, we actually have pretty good proof to base them on when creating them. Before the pandemic, we made a huge analysis of the nightlife in Copenhagen, and there we found these places.
Lawson says many of those convicted of violence in nightlife venues are repeat offenders. Violence in bars and clubs is a major contributor to Denmark's violent crime statistics. Denmark is known for its low crime rates, but violent crime has been rising in recent years. Natalia Nutting, NTD News.
EU officials say drug makers may face stricter rules to ensure the supply of medicines in the European Union. The bloc wants to reduce its imports of pharmaceutical products from China and other autocracies. EU Health Commissioner Stella Kyriakides says the EU needs to update its laws to ensure supply and achieve more transparency in the supply chain. The planned rules change is also aimed at reducing the EU's reliance on medicine ingredients produced abroad. The Commission estimates that 2/3 of the global supply is concentrated in India and China. At the onset of the pandemic last year, the 27-country bloc encountered problems in obtaining a wide range of medicines and their ingredients from these 2 countries. Alexei Navalny says a prison commission designated him an extremist and a terrorist. The anti-corruption campaigner has long been one of the best-known and fiercest critics of Russian President Vladimir Putin. He has survived poisoning with a nerve agent and been behind bars since February. He says the 2.5-year sentence is aimed at thwarting his political ambitions. Navalny has millions of followers on social media, and the anti-corruption videos made by his group have been watched by millions. Lauren Anthony reports.
Jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny said on Monday that a prison commission had designated him an extremist and a terrorist, but that he's no longer considered a flight risk. Posting on Instagram, the 45-year-old said he had been summoned before a panel, which voted unanimously in favour of the status change. The decision marks a further escalation of pressure against President Vladimir Putin's fiercest domestic critic. Navalny is currently serving 2.5 years in prison for parole violations he says were fabricated to thwart his political ambitions. He made light of the announcement, saying that he was glad he was no longer considered prone to escape and would therefore be subjected to less frequent and stringent nighttime checks by guards. "It's just that there is now a sign over my bunk that I am a terrorist," said Navalny in the Instagram post, which was published with the help of his lawyers. There was no immediate confirmation from Russian authorities of the change in Navalny's status. The Federal Penitentiary Service did not immediately reply to a request for comment. Navalny's movement suffered a fresh blow back in June when a court ruled its activities to be extremist. Last month, Russia opened a new criminal case against him that could keep him in jail for a further decade.
Italy's attempt to boost COVID vaccinations by making a contested vaccine pass necessary to go to work is not having the desired effect, data shows. Prime Minister Mario Draghi's government decreed last month that from Friday, any worker who fails to present the so-called Green Pass will be suspended without pay, hoping to convince unvaccinated Italians to have the jab. Public Administration Minister Renata Brunetta says when the measure was announced last month, it would trigger such an enormous acceleration of vaccinations that its goal could be largely achieved before it actually came into force. The measure, however, did not achieve the expected result. In the week up until last Friday, some 410,000 people received a first shot, according to data from the COVID Commissioner's office. It's a fall of 36% from the week before and the lowest weekly tally since early July. Meanwhile, protests in Italy against the Green Pass continue. Spain celebrated its National Day today as soldiers marched through the capital, parading in front of the royal family and government ministers. The celebration marks the landing of Christopher Columbus in the Caribbean and has met with debate in light of the history of Spanish colonialism. But many turned out to celebrate their country's history, calling for unity and cultural understanding. NTD's Eddie Aitken brings us the story.
Spain celebrated its National Day on Tuesday with a traditional military parade in front of the royal family in Madrid. King Felipe and Queen Letizia were met with cheers, watching the parade with politicians and members of Spain's Olympic team. Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez urged unity on Twitter before the parade, but was booed by a section of the crowd who appeared to be against his left-wing government. Spain's National Day celebrates Italian Christopher Columbus arriving on a Caribbean island in a voyage financed by Spanish kings. Celebrating Columbus Day has been questioned recently as his arrival began centuries of exploration and colonization. Despite the controversy, many are in support of the celebration.
I don't think that we have to ask for forgiveness. History is what it is. We have to admit that some things were done wrong, but I don't think we have to ask for forgiveness. It was a contribution of cultures in addition to ours. It meant adding more knowledge and being able to mix interculturally and reach what we are now.
Earlier on Tuesday in central London, the statue of Christopher Columbus was doused with red paint. The UK has recently explored a policy of retaining and explaining statues. City of London authorities agreed to add plaques to statues of merchants to explain how they profited from the 18th century slave trade. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
In Russia, one young man is dedicating his life to the ancient tradition of hunting for wild honey. The secret hives have been passed down for generations in his family. NTD's Costa has the story.
This young Russian man bears ropes and a blackened bee smoker. Ilda Yagafarov has a deep appreciation for the ancient practice of hunting for wild bee honey, a passion he inherited from his grandfather.
This is an ancient trade. The wild bee hives are in trees. Some of the hives are left over from our ancestors, and they are 150 to 200 years old. These trees are still alive, still growing and giving us joy with their bees and their honey.
Yagafarov says he harvested his first wild bee honey when he was 13, and now he hunts for it every autumn. The 1,000-year-old tradition almost died out, but it's slowly making a comeback.
Wild bee honey is harvested the ancient way. Hunters climb up trees using ropes. We are the only ones to preserve it in our Burzyansky district.
The locations of the wild hives are kept secret, passed from generation to generation.
I know that my grandfathers used to farm wild bee honey. My father inherited the trees, the tools, but he didn't do it because it was Soviet times, times of collective farming. He said, I have a tractor, I have a job. Why would I go to the forest? I don't need it.
As the hunters abandoned collecting honey from the forests, many hives were lost, as well as the techniques to harvest them. Costa NTD News.
Turkey's newest park is an underwater museum of 14 largely intact shipwrecks. Divers get a glimpse into the naval battles of World War I, when Ottoman forces defended their waters from invading British and French troops. Here's NTD's Eddie Aitken with the story.
Gallipoli Historic Underwater Park is one of Turkey's newest attractions. 14 shipwrecks beneath the waves of the Dardanelles Strait give divers a glimpse into the fierce battles of World War I.
We were waiting for a long time for this underwater historical park to be opened, and today that is the fortunate day. The park has 14 different shipwrecks for all different levels.
Its opening marks the 106th anniversary of Ottoman and German forces halting an invasion by British, French, Australian and Kiwi troops. Savas Karakas says he was able to reconnect with his grandfather who fought in the Gallipoli campaign of 1915.
My grandfather's hand was disfigured, he was wounded in action, his hand was burnt. I was always scared of his hand when I was a small child, but when I come to Gallipoli and when I dive, the rust metal, the steel reminds me of my grandfather's hands, and I hold this hand under the water.
The Ottoman resistance remains a point of deep pride in modern Turkey. It thwarted the Allies' plan to control the straits connecting the Aegean to the Black Sea. Heavy British losses include the sinking of the HMS Majestic battleship.
It made a major impact on the British Army and the Navy, and they lost a lot of morale when they lost. It could have changed the steering of the war.
Turks mark what they call the Çanakkale War, when Ottoman forces repelled an Allied assault, sinking a French battleship and destroying British warships. HMS Majestic is the first stop for divers at the park. It and other vessels are largely intact on the seafloor, a window into the naval struggles of World War I. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
That's the news for today. Have a good evening. Thank you for watching our daily news show on YouTube. You can also watch our other programming on channel 190 on Sky TV or on Freeview via channel box on channel 271. In the meantime though, please give this video a like and hit subscribe to our channel. Have a good day.